Hey guys, it's Dave for Heavy Gear Videos. Just like to make a quick video to explain a couple of things about timing during the game of Heavy Gear. So, timing is when stuff happens and in what order and when to do stuff. So there's a nice section in the New Living Rulebook which illustrates this for each part of attacking, but it's important to point out that the things that happen in a turn happen in a particular sequence. So what happens is here, for example, I've got two Jaegers being a combat group and two Jaegers and two Hunters on this side being a combat group as well. Now, when the game of Heavy Gear happens, players alternate activating combat groups. Combat groups are a unit of organization for an army. It allows a primary unit and an attached secondary unit. Secondary units are small support elements, either a recon model, a tank model, or even just more troopers if that's what the player decides to put in their army. So when you're using your force, you're always activating a combat group. That means these two hunters plus the other guys in the unit, maybe they're already destroyed, plus maybe a tank or a strider or a couple of fire support models. So the North player, if they were activating, would activate each model in their unit in turn, doing all the moving and firing with that model before moving on to the next model. When taking their actions, it's important to note that the models have to choose their posture, i.e. are they going at combat speed, bracing to shoot, or going at top speed, before they do any moving, shooting, or actions. You have to tell your opponent that. If you don't tell your opponent everything, assume it's combat speed. So you don't always have to tell your opponent, but if you do, don't do anything odd. You haven't told them something, so they're assuming it's combat speed. That can help speed up the game a bit. When you do any kind of action, such as this guy with the snub cannon decides he wants to take a shot, he gets to measure the range to his targets. So he's going to check, he can measure the range, and in this case, because he's a basic hunter, he can say, okay, well I can measure my range to this guy, and I say, okay, well if my range, my snub cannon optimum is 3 to 6, well you know what, I'm in my optimum range, so I'm going to fire my snub cannon. But if I was outside of my optimum range, if I had a different weapon like a Panzerfaust or a grenade or something else I'd rather use, I can do that then. I don't have to choose the weapon I shoot until I know what the range is to my target. I still have to shoot that target. If he's out of range, I'm out of luck. But I can at least choose the weapon that matches the tactical scenario the best. Before I make any rolls, I have to ask my opponent, do they want to react? Is there anything they want to do? And so I say, I'm going to shoot, I'm going to attack him, I've checked my range, I'm going to use this weapon, are you shooting back at me, are you going to snap fire? And my opponent will tell me yes or no. Now in this case, there's something where these two models, these two Jaegers, are actually in the same unit. So even if this guy shoots at the Jaeger up on the building, because his buddy is within 6 inches of him, he's going to be able to shoot back. This is called being in formation. This Jaeger has a special commander head. If I can show you that carefully. So there's a little squarish head, tells them apart. You know, in a real combat situation, marking yourself out like that would just mean a sniper would get you, but we like to do this with the models so we can tell them apart. And over here, we have a hunter. Their version of commander is called the hunter headhunter. He's got the 2 bars on the head. So in this case, if your models are within 6 inches of the commander of the unit, then they're called in formation, which means they can do things which are special that models that are out of formation can't. One of the really cool things about Heavy Gear is we assume that the troopers have a basic knowledge of military tactics and training, and they can operate just fine outside of formation. So they can run around, they can flank, they can take advantage, they can get locked in combat, and the rest of the unit can move on if that's the choice of the commander. But if they're in formation, such as within 6 inches in the case we have here, then if this hunter fires this Jaeger, then this Jaeger over here can do a snap fire shooting back at the hunter. Now you can only shoot back at the hunter who's firing. You can't shoot back at, say, the commander target that's next to him. The nice thing about this is it means that if a model pops out of cover in order to take a better shot, you can have a couple of models shoot back at him. So there's a benefit to this, is if a high value model pops up to take its shot, you're not limited to just only the model being shot at to use a snapfire action. You can use any model that's in formation to take that shot and try to take out that high value target. In this case, we'd have an activation with, first I'd activate, say, this guy, and then this guy, and then we'd have any reactions, and then the turn would move over to the other player, and we'd have a Jaeger doing an action, and another Jaeger doing an action. The round ends when both sides have done an action with every single model on their side. When a model uses an action, it's said to become used. In a small number of model game, I might say, you know what, I can remember when every model has done something, but sometimes it can help to have a few counters or a little marker around. I just put a marker on the commander of the unit when I'm done activating that unit, just to let me know that, okay, you know what, these guys are done. One of the goals of the Heavy Gear Living Rulebook is to make the game fast and easy to play, as well as make sure there's not too many markers on the table to clutter it up and get in the way of the game. But in certain cases, you might find it useful to have a few random tokens, like this is one from Risk, or if a model takes damage, you can put a counter next to it. In this case, I use the red bingo counters for 4 damage, an orange one would equal 3 damage, a yellow is 2, and a green would be 1 damage. So if this model had 5 damage, I'd put a 4 and a 1 next to it, and that would indicate the damage. And that I can stack up next to it. In this case, I've also got a special marker. It's a skull and bones, so that one would indicate that this model has a command point. And a command point is a special thing commanders have. It allows you to re-roll any roll your models make. This can help you if you're doing a critical attack roll or a critical defense roll, and you really want to make sure that you don't blow the roll with a really bad set of dice. So having a couple of tokens nearby is very useful. I highly recommend it. We try to keep them to a limit, and to do this I'm going to show you an example of what a flamethrower can do. So this is a light flamethrower right here. This Jaegers are well known as having some pretty light weaponry, but in this case a flamethrower is a bit of a special example. Flamethrowers are one of those weapons that you can use to cause massive damage to almost any target. In this case, a flamethrower only has a penetration rating of 3. It can't really bust through armor, but it does have fire. So let's try an example. Let's try a case of Jaeger attacks, and it gets a 5 and a 4. A 5 and a 4 is a pretty good roll. So that would mean you get a 5. The 4 would equal or beat the gunnery of 4+, so you'd add 1 to the 5 to get a 6 in total. In this case, the Jaeger would, because these two guys, the Flamer has an area effect of 3 inches, which means both of these hunters are going to be in the area effect. But the Jaeger says, you know, I'm going to attack this guy as my primary target. So I'm going to roll his 2 dice. Let's see what happens to him. He gets a 5 and a 3. The 3 doesn't equal or beat the gunnery, so that's not going to add anything to his defense. Now, I roll a 6 to attack him, but now because he's a secondary target in an area effect, I'm going to roll, instead of my 2 dice, I'm going to roll only 1 dice. There's going to be a penalty of 1 dice for attacking him. So I'll roll for him, and I'll also get a 6, so he's in trouble. Now he's going to roll. He still gets to roll 2 dice for his defense. So I'm going to roll for him, and he's going to get a 4. His other dice was a 2, so that doesn't add anything with the piloting. So in this case, we've got a 4 and a 5. That's a margin of 1 in favor of the Jaeger. Over here, it's a 6 to a 4 is a margin of 2 in favor of the Jaeger. So now with Flamers, it's special. So we do the normal calculation of I'd add my pen of 3 to my 6. I get a 9, minus 5 for his roll, minus 6 for his armor, would be a negative. I wouldn't do any damage, but there's fire involved. And the cool thing about fire is fire takes the margin, which is 1 in this case, and adds, in the case of a light flamer, it adds 1 dice to it. So I'm going to roll 2 dice, and for each of these dice that's a 4 or more, it's going to cause 1 damage. So bang, 1 damage to him. In the case here, we've got a margin of 2, and we'll add the 1 dice for the light flamer to that, so I'll roll 3 dice, and I rolled 2 6s and a 1, so in that case we would do 2 damage to this guy. Now the nice thing to notice here is the fire damage ignores the armor completely. It doesn't matter. It just does some straight damage. It's assumed that the fire suppression systems will then, cut out the fire before anything else can happen, but this damage can't be prevented by fire suppression. It's just there. Something melted or something burned, And even if the model is slightly on fire, it's not, the critical components are protected. So we don't have a trail of tokens that follow them, but in this case, we'll take the 2 damage, replace it with a yellow marker, take the 1 damage, replace it with the green, and that way we can track the damage on these models easily. Alright, that's a good example of fire. Fire is one of the 3 persistent types of damage, or as it was called in the beta rules, but we've given it a new name. It's now called special weapon effects. So the flamer is a weapon that can do damage regardless of armor, so that's pretty special. There's also weapons that cause corrosion. The Sand Riders of the New Coal faction are most known for this because they use highly corrosive bullets that can burn through armor and melt components. So corrosion does the same thing, but it does it just on different groups of weapons. It does it with the ammunition rather than the type of weapon itself. There's also a type of special effect called haywire. In the case of haywire, if you hit a target, it's going to suffer from critical damage modifiers until the end of the turn, which you really shock the model and make it an easy target. That's the only one of the special weapon effects that actually lays a special token on the model. In this case, for my own use, I like to use a little lightning bolt if a model's being hit with a haywire effect, just to remind me if I shoot at him, he's going to be an easier target. So I hope you have a number of tokens you can use. We are providing a number of paper tokens in the living rulebook that anyone can print out and use, and we should be announcing some nice 3-dimensional acrylic style tokens in the near future. So keep your eyes out for that. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.